everyone, and welcome to the End of Life Journey and Beyond, the Sands of Time. My name is Lisa Strahs-Lorenc, and I am a Bereavement Support Specialist. Hello, Susan. Always great to see you.
Hi, Lisa. It's so nice to see you too, and I'm so happy to be here today. My name is Susan Capurso. I'm a legacy specialist, and I help people leave their history and memories and stories and wisdom and love for future generations. Reach out to Lisa and I anytime if we could be of service to you. Today's video is really, when we talked about it, I thought, Lisa, that this is common sense. Everybody knows about this. The myth of closure while we're grieving or during your grief timeline, that there will be some kind of closure at some point. But in Lisa and I, in all of our years of experience and in all of the videos we've done over the last several years, we can honestly say that those feelings or thoughts really are a myth because they're not the way that we think the events in our lives and the story in our life will unfold. It turns out to be much different than we expect at the beginning. In other words, we have a loss and we think, oh, how hard it is and difficult and this and that, but okay, by next year I'll be better.
Right,
Let me give myself 12 months. We'll
right.
put it on
There's
the
the clock.
calendar because I'll be better next year. I know myself.
Right.
None of that matters. So there is a myth in all of this. And I was reminded of this myth of closure with a very prestigious end of life doula in the field who had put out an email, honestly. And she talked a little bit about that in a few paragraphs about that, how there is a myth to the way we think we will receive closure or peace or when that will happen. And it got me to thinking, and Lisa, that it is a myth. It is, because it never turns out the way we expected. So today, with a few really meaningful personal stories that Lisa wants to talk about here, we're going to unravel why um, our grieving and our healing timeline really can be a myth, even to us, to our own selves. Regardless, forget about the other people in our lives. They all have their, you need to be done grieving in 4 weeks. They have that on their calendar. But regardless, right?
Yeah,
We're learning that it can be a myth on how we receive our closure.
yeah.
So having said that, Lisa, I want you to talk about a couple of the things we talked about earlier. We started dabbling on before the video today because very meaningful,
Yeah.
very meaningful.
Yeah, so some interesting falsehoods and pressures from people, not only for ourselves, that we think that in time it's going to be fine and we will now forget everything and move on and all. But from others, not only friends, but family. I hear from people, so my children say it's been a couple years. Okay. So what are you doing now? And aren't you over daddy's death? And so what else are you doing with your life? A lot of pressure, a lot of pressure from people. Um, and then we pressure ourselves because we think, well, why aren't I? And what's going on? So I'm 14 years out. No, sorry, 16 years out, and I have a new life. Um, and I think what's interesting about that is to really embrace what grieving is. Grieving is a whole process, but grieving is also keeping it in your life. So I have a new life, but something like yesterday, which was Father's Day, brings back a lot of sadness. I don't have a husband anymore, and the kids don't have their father anymore. And it's a day that's just sort of an empty-ish day. Now, on other days, I have found things to do. I always tell people, encourage them to watch a movie or encourage them to do something that might remind them of their, the loss or somebody. But Father's Day is really different for me. And so people say there's a little bit of a roller coaster, and there is. There are times where you're going along and life just seems okay. I'm just doing my thing and living life. And then the next moment, that twinge of sadness, or that's something that reminded you of something, or the fact that both Susan and I have sons that are going to get married. That is such a bittersweet thing that I already am teared up about because you think, hey, he should be there. And so it doesn't disappear and it's still part of you. And so I want to show you something that I showed a long, long time ago. Somebody gave me this at one of the meetings that I was at, and it's the most incredible way of depicting grief. I love it. It's just it's so true, and it's exactly what we're talking about here. And I think it will resonate with a lot of people. Okay, so can you see that, Susan?
Not
There it
yet.
is. Okay, it's up now.
Hold on. Hold on. No, I
Okay,
see a black screen here.
okay. Make sure it comes up.
Now it is. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. All right, so here's the deal. The top row, okay? This is what people think grief is. So here's your jar of life and your grief ball. And it's big, it's huge because it just happened. Then over time, they believe your grief ball gets smaller. There's your jar of life, still the same, and then it gets really tiny. That is not what really happens. And this is just such an amazing way of looking at the way grief really is. So here's what really happens as we grow around our grief. Our jar is there, and there's the grief ball, but your jar gets larger as you continue to live and you continue to do different things in your life. That grief ball is still the same, but look how big your jar of life got. And there's grief still there, but you grow around the grief. And that's what absolutely has happened to me. I have a whole new life. You know, life is different than we all expect it to be. But grief is still part of my life. It doesn't just disappear. It's not going to ever disappear, but my life, my jar, has grown around it. This depicts my life, and I think it depicts the way if we could look at our lives that way, we could embrace grief as just part of our lives. It is a natural part of our lives, and it's not going to just disappear. It is going to be part of us forever, but in different ways because we are growing. We are embracing our lives. We are trying to figure out what else we can do with our lives. And everybody, there's no time frame on this. However, we have talked about when somebody is just so depressed that they do need some help, and we've talked about that before. But the average person, grief is there. That was their part of their lives. And if they could embrace that, embrace the memories, celebrate that, celebrate everything that happened in their lives, and say, yes, this is okay. Instead of brushing aside, oh, I shouldn't feel this way now. I can't feel this way now. This shouldn't be what. No, that kind of pressure is what makes people really worse. And it comes from friends who say, well, what are you doing now? And it comes from family, who say, well, should be more, should be this, whatever. Go ahead.
Lisa, I also, and thank you so much. That was an important picture to share today. And that's the whole basis of our video. And we wanted to show that again. That wasn't a previous video for a second of the video,
Yeah.
but we wanted to expand on that today. But I think, in this lifetime as human beings, I say this all the time, we're here for such a short amount of time, right? 100 years if we're lucky. Not everybody makes it that long.
Yeah.
But I also think that as human beings, we think we know thousands of people, right? We think our circles are a lot bigger than they really are. And I've discovered this over life. Like even if I move out of my own town, how do I leave my house and move out of my hometown? I know everybody here. right? And then when I think about making a list of the people who I'll miss or they will miss me, oh God, there's two in my little town. It just doesn't make sense. Our thought process is a little different. So, what I've come to find out in doing all, our experience with loss and all this grieving is that some people are, first of all, we're all going to suffer from grief
That's right.
at some point in our lives, but some people may not have those big circles, those big giant circles. That's what I'm talking about here. So if your circles are smaller, you suffer less grief, right? You don't know as many people that have died in your past or that are dying in your present or dying in your future. So it's harder for you to understand. So now you have a loss, okay? And I'm talking about that other person who doesn't understand, okay? That other person might think in some way that your pain is like physical pain.
Mm,
It's like physical pain. And when I say that, because what happens with physical pain? All right. I had something recently under my hand. Okay. It was so sensitive to the touch. And if I went like this, I felt pain. I felt something underneath it. And I panicked a little at first in my brain, and then I knew it would go away. So when the majority of people think of pain, they think of pain like that, to a headache. That pain goes away, especially if we take 2 ibuprofen and call me
right,
in the morning or lay
right.
down, take a nap, you'll wake up and the headache will be gone. So a lot of people think of this grief pain in terms of
Mm,
physical pain, not emotional pain.
mm, mm,
Now, some of these people in your life may not have suffered emotional pain as deep as loss, or they suffered loss because they knew somebody in their child's school who passed away and they attended the funeral. That's how they know loss. They don't know it as if it was a spouse or a sibling or a parent or a really tight friendship that you can't live without that person. Some people don't know it.
yeah,
So you have to remember that when it comes to us talking about these myths of closure in
yes,
grief, because it will be different for everybody and for everybody welcoming you in your
that's
life.
true. And really, no one stands in your shoes. That's the thing. Okay. So no one knows exactly who you are, what you've gone through in your life. We're all individuals and we all react differently. We all, you know, our personalities are different, the way we operate in life, the way we reach out to people, it doesn't work for everybody.
And we think sometimes that other people think and behave like we do.
Right. Right.
And I think one of the biggest lessons I learned in life, I'll never forget this. I was 18, 17 or 18. And my girlfriend and I were sitting outside of a bar, that my first bar that I ever went into. And I think we were hesitant about going in. So we're sitting in the car in the parking lot for hours having conversation. But she gave me one of the biggest lessons. I was judgmental about somebody, and she stopped me in my tracks and she
Mm,
says, "You will live a much easier life." This is how smart she was at my
right.
age, right? If you always remember that everybody in the world is different from you.
Mm,
Not
mm,
everybody thinks the same, feels the same. They've been through different things. So you may take an instance like this and they take it like this.
mhm, mhm,
No two people are alike, and that's the beauty of our world and this world that God made here. We're all different. But she said, and you will be better off if you learn this lesson now. And I never forgot
mm.
that.
Wow.
I never forgot it. I still struggle with it sometimes because sometimes I think that other people are thinking the same way as me
Yeah.
until you learn that they're not, and then you're reminded of that.
Yeah.
But if we could all think that way, that's my point. If we could all know that everybody's different and not everybody does know that, Lisa.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But this closure thing is very important because if we, as we continue to go through life, if we keep fighting this in ourselves, we're not going to be able to embrace anything else. It's like a yin yang, right? The good and the bad, the bright and the dark. And people always say that you don't appreciate the bright until you've had dark.
So I want you to tell our listeners today about how your thought process was working this weekend when you were celebrating something on Saturday and then Sunday came and you did a 360.
Yeah,
But as smart as we are in helping people educate people on end of life, we too are human beings.
that's right. We are.
Right? We're
We
not
are.
better or think that much differently than anybody who's listening today.
That's
We're the
right.
same. So just
Okay.
explain that a little bit, but then
Sure.
explain, I want you to just add to that and explain on Sunday afternoon how your thought process was working and what you told yourself
Yeah. Yeah.
in order to keep moving.
Sure, sure. So Saturday night was a concert that we go to, my partner and we go every year. It's a Happy Together tour, Westbury Music Fair, and it's all oldies. And it was our second date. So it's wonderful to go and listen to these oldie people. They're all in their 70s and 80s. Some are better singers than others, but the memories of the songs from the 60s are just incredible. And you're in a room with everybody sort of the same age, enjoying those incredible memories together, of innocent songs and great songs and songs that I think have withstood the time. Okay. So the next day, um, so part of this, and people are so afraid. They're so afraid to feel sad. It's not okay to say, I feel sad. It's not okay to grieve. It's not okay. And it is okay. So I woke up and I knew it's Father's Day. And I posted because I post all the time. So I posted pictures of my father. I posted pictures of my husband. That's what I do. I went on my husband's site and wished him a happy Father's Day because that's what I do. And that for me is my therapy. That's what I do. And I embrace that sadness. It's sad. He isn't here. Life is different than what I thought it would be. And that's okay. And I accept that instead of fighting it and saying, I shouldn't feel that way, or I better run around and do 10 million things. I sit with it. That's what I do. Okay. That helps me. I let it stay with me. We did other things during the day after that. We were with family, but it was still part of me. I didn't, erase it. I didn't say this is not the day. This is not. So the difference between that and people who just sort of try to forget, for me, if I did that, I feel like it would be wiping away a life. Okay, two lives, my husband's and my father's. And so for me personally, I'd rather sit with that sadness and say, I feel sad that he's not here and that he's not part of my life anymore. And it's, by the way, it's three people. It's not only my husband and my father, but it's my father's substitute, my uncle, who died last year, who was my father substitute for 40 years. And he was amazing, just like my father was amazing. And so I have all this positive stuff, but they're not here anymore. Okay. So for me, as I've tried to explain, I embrace grief. Grief is not something for me to just avoid and say, okay, this didn't happen. This isn't the day. This is not. For me, I try to help people still celebrate in whatever way they feel comfortable. For me, I've given examples of movies. I've given examples of going places. I've given examples of restaurants. Things that I do that for me. Now, for other people, that might not work or that might not feel right. But for me, and I can only speak for how it makes me feel, I don't want to say they didn't exist, this didn't happen, that would feel hurtful to me. Okay. So I went through the day. I still participated in the family activities, but it was there. It sat on my shoulders. It was still there that it was Father's Day and that I don't have any fathers and I don't have a husband left to celebrate with. So that's
So
my.
how was, okay, so now that leads to my question. So how deep did you get emotionally? Were you crying?
No,
And then what did you say out loud or in your head? What did you say to help yourself to feel better, to get through the day and to move on till tomorrow, to
right.
tomorrow?
Father's Day does not impact me as much as like my daughter's wedding. So let's just talk about a day, okay? A special day and all. So my daughter's wedding, coming up to it thinking my husband's not going to be there with me to walk her down the aisle. And I thought of it, I remembered it, and it finally hit me when I stood on that line next to her and next to my son who was on the other side of her. And that's when I had this emotional, I thought I wasn't going to get through and get down the aisle. That's really how I felt. It was really overwhelming. And that happens to me once in a while when something is really, really special. It's so bittersweet. You want to share, you feel like, hey, like the birth of my granddaughter or all three granddaughters, he's not here to see his granddaughters, those kinds of things. But getting through the day like that day is just a sadness that sits with me. It isn't crying, it isn't that. It's more of, it's just part of me. It's there. I feel it. I know it's there, but it's not like a breakdown. Which, by the way, I just want to say to everybody, it's okay to break down. I have said to people, why not cry for a while? It's all right. People are so afraid that if they break down, they're not gonna, it's like Humpty Dumpty. You will never be able to put him back together again. That is not true. Those moments and those times, that's fine. It's when they become weeks, months, whatever, where you cannot function at all, where we've said it. Then we know you need a little help. You need somebody else. You need a group, or you need therapy, whatever, or medication, something to help you through. But we're not talking about that now. We're talking about just being able to embrace grief because it is part of our lives. And that's why my jar has gotten so much bigger in my life. Who would have ever thought that my life would be what it is now? Never in a million years, 16 years ago, would I ever thought I'd be where I am now. And that's not the measure. That for me is just the way my life is turning out. And I've been open and embrace it. Okay.
But okay, so people handle things
Yes, they do.
differently.
Yes, they do.
Like if you want to give the other example of, I don't know if you want to bring up,
The family.
yeah,
So I know somebody whose father died a couple years ago, and her brothers have said to the mother, hey, it's been a couple years, like move on. I mean, basically, and she got really angry at the brothers and said to them, hey, what do you expect mom to do? She lost, daddy, and she lost her spouse. And she said to me, they don't understand. And it's very hard. And nobody understands a partner as opposed to a parent. I've said that to people. It's very different losing a partner from a parent. And I've gone through both and all. So, she's very frustrated with them. And I gave her our, tube here. And I said, look, let her listen and watch some of these so that and them too, by the way, so they can understand her better and understand maybe where she's at, and then let her feel like she's not so crazy. They're making her feel crazy. What's wrong with me? Why aren't I? Whatever. And we have said a million times, it is true. Everybody is different. And look, all of us would like our friends, our relatives to quote, feel better or to be better or to live better, whatever it is we wish for them. But the rest of it is that we are all different. And so a relative for me who has said to me, I actually would like to be in the grave next to my wife. Okay. Um, that's hard for me to hear, but that is how he feels. He says, my life is basically over. And yet he has two sons, he has grandchildren, but that is how he feels. And so all the friends around him who've invited him to events, who invited him to different kinds of observances, holidays and things like that, he's much more content being by himself. This is how he's doing it now. Now, that's not to say that in a year from now, maybe it'll change and maybe it won't change. But this is what his path is right now. And it is hard for us all, especially those who care about him, to hear that and to embrace that. But as I said to him, it's your life. It's your life. So he
Now,
says,
everybody knows Lisa as celebrating life.
that's right.
Okay, so what about your other family members who have had losses and the 2 days in a row were really hard, but they ran around and shopped and kept busy and did everything they had to do to not think about
Right,
the losses. And
right,
I know you didn't generally agree with that,
right,
but then again, you have to go back to the same thing that everybody grieves differently.
right, right. What we
Yeah.
all need to just know is when somebody's really in trouble, okay, truly in trouble. And we've talked about that because that is a concern. Um, if somebody wants to take their own life, that's, another issue for people. Or if somebody hides stuff and then they become sick, I'm physically sick, which does happen to people. Our bodies are very influenced by our emotional state. They really are. Cells apparently change. I mean, there's all kinds of studies about this. So, again, I don't want to tell people how to live. I would love people to be able to get to the point where they do celebrate the people who are no longer in their lives, but that it looks different for people and maybe that won't be part of what they feel they can do. It works for me. That memorial site works for me. It's how I
But the
celebrate.
but the point of the video, getting back
Yes.
to
Yes.
the closure is a myth,
That's right. That's
right?
right.
And
That's
and know that. Know that in advance. It's a myth as far as it may not turn out exactly the way you think or feel that it should.
right.
Or for somebody else, maybe it was a little bit different and they were able to adjust a little bit better,
Right.
and maybe you won't.
Right.
But that it's all okay.
Right. It's all okay.
Regardless, your story is your story.
Right.
Not when it's a danger. We've said that several times,
Yeah.
but your story is your story. And just know to embrace your story, right? If it's
That's right.
sadness and tears and I want to stay in bed and watch movies all day,
Yes. And
let
that's
it be.
okay. That
Let
is
it be.
really okay.
That's okay.
And it
I've
is,
had a
and
few
that,
of those myself.
yeah, and that roller coaster. I think people have said that, it's like a little roller coaster to this tippy tippy top, and then you fall down and well, and really that is sometimes how it feels.
Right. But that grief will always be there.
That's right.
That ball of grief is always the same. Just be surprised about how your jar of life will grow larger around your ball of grief.
Yeah.
Larger to where you will be able to incorporate some happiness and more love and a little more joy in your life as time moves forward.
Yeah. And that is really what we wish for everyone, truly. You
Yeah.
said from the very beginning, life is short, and that's true. So here we are, and we can determine what we decide to do with our lives.
Yeah. I'd love for you to save this video just for the fact that the pictures that Lisa showed at the beginning with the jar and the grief, and share that with a friend.
Yeah.
That's very educational and valuable to see that.
Yeah.
I know it changed my perspective when I was able to see that in a simple artistic drawing.
Yeah.
It's not even that artistic, it's simple, but it clearly represents how our lives build around that ball of grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, Lisa, I hope that we helped a few people today to know that your journey is different from everybody else's. that there may never be closure in your grief, and that whole thing about closure and having, a certain timeline to grieve for the people you love isn't just not true.
Yeah.
It's not true. And it may be for 5 years, and then all of a sudden you're hanging Christmas ornaments on Christmas Eve and you just lose control,
That's right.
because
Right.
you can't take the memories. And that tends to happen to me every Christmas. So I'm trying to find ways to change that a little bit. This year I didn't have a glass of wine, and it definitely helped not having the glass of wine and hanging the ornaments, because that just made me a little more sentimental.
Yeah.
So you'll
Yeah.
find your ways, you'll find your road, and you'll find the journey that's best for you.
Lovely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's all we're saying. Stick with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, it was great
Okay.
to be here with you,
Yep.
Lisa, again
Thank
today.
you,
If you have
Susan.
any other topics that you'd like us to talk about,
Please.
we're always looking for new things to bring to you to just help make you feel a little better or learn a little
Yes.
better and grow in ways that you haven't before. And
And
we
if you know any
appreciate you.
speakers that have a topic that you think would be really relevant to this,
Let us know.
we welcome speakers as well. So
Our contact information's right up top.
it is.
Like and share our page. We're gaining some momentum now, which is a great thing. And we appreciate you being here.
We
And
do.
until next
Okay.
week, we'll
Until
see you
next
then.
time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.